My name is Cassandra Elaine Pruitt, and I want you to understand something before I tell you this story. I was not always a woman who knew how to fight back. I was the kind of woman who smoothed things over, who kept the peace, who told herself that love was supposed to feel like walking on eggshells. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, in a house where my mother ironed my father's shirts even when her hands were shaking from crying, and I swore I would never be her. I swore I would build something different, something real, something that couldn't be taken from me. I was wrong about the man I chose to build it with, but I was dead right about one thing. When the moment came, I didn't fall apart. I burned everything down with a smile on my face and a lawyer on speed dial. And I want every woman reading this to know exactly how I did it. Because what happened to my daughter Lily on that Tuesday afternoon in our 12,000 square foot home in Buckhead, Atlanta, was the kind of thing that doesn't just break your heart, it detonates it. And from the rubble, I built something none of them ever saw coming. Let me take you back to the beginning. I met Donovan Reed Calloway at a charity gala in Midtown Atlanta when I was 31 years old. I was newly divorced from my first husband, Theo, who was the sweetest man I've ever known, but also the most financially irresponsible human being God ever breathed life into. Theo and I had Lily together. She was 3 when we split, and despite everything, Theo and I parted as friends. He paid what he could in child support, showed up for birthdays, called every Sunday. He wasn't a villain. He was just someone who loved me in a way that couldn't hold us both up. So I let him go, picked up my daughter, and started over with nothing but a marketing degree, a freelance portfolio, and a 400 square foot apartment in Decatur that smelled faintly of someone else's cooking. Donovan found me standing next to a shrimp cocktail display looking completely out of my element. He was tall, the kind of tall that reads his confidence before he even opens his mouth. Dark hair, square jaw, custom navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He was 40, the founder of a private equity firm called Callaway Capital Group, and he had the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room. I know now that smile was a tool. Back then, it was everything. We dated for 8 months. During those 8 months, Donovan was perfect. Flowers at the office, weekend trips to Charleston, surprise dinners where he'd already called ahead and ordered my favorite wine. He took Lily to the aquarium on our 3rd date and held her hand the whole time and let her name all the fish. I watched him crouch down to her 4-year-old height and say, "Which one do you think is the boss?" And she pointed to the ugliest catfish in the tank, and he laughed so hard his eyes watered. I fell in love with that laugh. I fell in love with the idea that this man, this wealthy, powerful, seemingly gentle man, wanted to be in our lives, in Lily's life. We got married 14 months after we met in a vineyard in Napa that his business partner Reginald Spade booked as a wedding gift. I wore a dress that cost $8,000. Lily was my flower girl. She wore white and threw rose petals and danced at the reception until her little shoes fell off. I have a photo of her asleep in Donovan's arms at 11 that night, her head on his shoulder, her mouth slightly open, completely trusting. I kept that photo on my nightstand for 3 years. I threw it through a window eventually, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The first 2 years were good. Not perfect, nothing is, but good. We moved into the Buckhead house. Lily started first grade at Westbrook Academy, the kind of school where every classroom has a smart board and the cafeteria serves actual farm-to-table food, and the parents all drive European SUVs and talk about their kitchen renovations like it's a competitive sport. I launched my own marketing agency out of a home office, and within a year I had 6 clients and 2 employees and a revenue stream that I was quietly, privately proud of because I had built it myself. Donovan never said he was proud of me. He said things like, "That's cute, babe," and "You sure you can handle that?" and "Don't let it stress you out." I told myself he was just protective. I told myself a lot of things. The cracks started showing around year 2. Little things first. He'd forget Lily's school events. Just forget, not maliciously, just absent. Then he started correcting her at dinner. Not guiding her, correcting her. "Sit up straight. Don't interrupt. That's not how you hold a fork." She was 6. She was 6 years old eating spaghetti, and he was commenting on her elbow placement like she was at a state dinner. I said something once. He looked at me like I had accused him of a crime. "I'm teaching her," he said. "Or are you going to let her grow up with no manners?" I backed down. I always back down in those days. Then the business trips started getting longer. 3 days became 5, 5 became 10. I didn't question it because Callaway Capital Group was expanding into the Southeast Asian market, and Donovan had always traveled, and honestly, when he was gone, the house felt lighter. Lily laughed more. I slept better. The dog stopped hiding under the bed. That should have told me everything I needed to know, but I had gotten very good at not knowing things. It was his assistant, a 26-year-old woman named Priya Sanjay, who accidentally forwarded me an email meant for Donovan. Just an innocent logistical error. Hotel confirmations for a trip to San Francisco that Donovan had told me was a client meeting, but was apparently a long weekend that included a reservation at Atelier Cren, a couple's spa package at the Fairmont, and a booking under both their names. Priya must have realized her mistake within seconds because she sent a recall message immediately after. But it was too late. I had already read it twice. I had already screenshotted it. I had already sat down very slowly on the kitchen floor while Lily watched cartoons 15 feet away and understood, in that cold and clarifying way that only true betrayal can produce, that my marriage was a lie. I didn't confront him that night. I want you to understand this about me. When I am hurt, I do not cry first. I think first. I got up off that kitchen floor. I made Lily grilled cheese. I helped her with her spelling homework. I gave her a bath. I read her 2 chapters of Charlotte's Web, and I kissed her forehead and turned off her lamp. Then I went to my office, locked the door, opened my laptop, and called my college roommate, Jada Ferris, who is now a forensic accountant in Nashville, and I said, "Jada, I need you to help me find out everything." What Jada found over the next 6 weeks was breathtaking in its scope. Donovan had been having an affair with Priya for at least 14 months, overlapping almost perfectly with the period where he'd started becoming colder at home. But it wasn't just an affair. Jada found financial irregularities in how Callaway Capital Group was structured. Shell companies, a secondary LLC registered in Delaware under a name that was technically Donovan's mother's maiden name, money moving in patterns that looked very deliberate and very much like a man quietly preparing to exit a marriage without losing half of what was his. He was planning to leave me. He had been planning it for over a year. He was just waiting for the right moment. I gathered everything. Every document, every screenshot, every bank statement Jada could access legally, every hotel confirmation I could trace, every phone record I was entitled to under Georgia's discovery statutes once I quietly filed a preliminary consultation with my attorney, a woman named Vivian Cross who is 5 feet 2 inches tall and has the courtroom presence of a federal judge, and who told me on our first meeting, "Cassandra, when we are done, he will wish he'd never learned your name." I liked her immediately. I want to tell you about the day everything changed, because it happened so fast and so completely that even now, 2 years later, I still feel the temperature of that afternoon in my chest like a physical thing. It was a Tuesday, October. Lily had just gotten home from school and she was at the kitchen island doing homework while I was on a call in the adjoining sunroom with the door partially open. Donovan came home earlier than expected. I heard the garage door, heard his keys, heard him drop his bag in the mudroom. He walked into the kitchen. He didn't know I could hear everything. Lily said, "Hi, Donovan." She'd stopped calling him Dad about 6 months before that, which I'd noticed and filed away. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. He said something I couldn't quite catch. Then Lily said, I can hear her voice right now, this clear, careful, hopeful little voice. "Can you help me with my math? Mom's on a call." And Donovan Reed Calloway, this man who had held my daughter's hand at an aquarium and let her name Catfish and carried her sleeping body in his arms at our wedding, said, "Lily, I'm tired, and honestly, you're not my responsibility. Ask your mother or call your real dad." She heard everything. I hung up the phone. I did not walk into that kitchen for 4 full minutes because I needed those 4 minutes to make a decision about what kind of woman I was going to be from that moment forward. I could hear Lily crying, not loud, not dramatic, the worst kind of crying, the quiet kind, the kind that means a child is trying very hard not to let someone see that they're hurt. When I walked in, Donovan was on his phone like nothing had happened. Lily was bent over her math worksheet with tears falling onto the paper, trying to still do her homework. This 7-year-old child trying to pull herself together after being told she didn't matter to the man who was supposed to protect her. I picked her up. I held her. I said nothing to Donovan. Not one single word. He looked up from his phone, registered the situation, and said, "She's being dramatic." I walked out of the room carrying my daughter, and I did not speak to Donovan for the rest of the night. That night, after Lily finally cried herself to sleep in my arms at 9 o'clock, I texted Vivian Cross 3 words, "File it now." She texted back, "Already drafted, I'll send the complaint in the morning." I sent one more text, this one to Jada. "Go ahead." Jada texted back a single emoji, a chess piece, a queen. Here is what happened in the next 72 hours, and I want you to pay close attention because this is where the story stops being about pain and starts being about power. Hour 1 through 12. Vivian filed a divorce petition at 8:47 a.m. Wednesday morning in Fulton County Superior Court. The petition included preliminary injunctive relief, meaning before Donovan was even formally served, the court issued a temporary freeze on certain jointly held accounts based on Vivian's documented showing of asset concealment. The Delaware LLC, the shell transfers, the offshore account trail that Jada had spent 6 weeks piecing together, all of it went in front of a judge who looked at it and signed the freeze order within 2 hours because judges in Fulton County have seen this particular playbook before and they are not impressed by it. Hour 12 through 24. Donovan was served at Callaway Capital Group's Midtown office at 2:15 p.m. on a Wednesday by a process server who handed him the petition in the lobby in front of 3 of his colleagues, his assistant, Priya, and a client from Houston he'd been courting for months. I did not plan the timing of the lobby service. Vivian did. She said later, "Witnesses matter. Momentum matters." I don't disagree. What I had not told you yet is that I had also, 3 weeks prior to all of this, forwarded a summary of Jada's financial findings, carefully, anonymously, through a third-party attorney who could not be traced back to me, to the Securities and Exchange Commission and to the Georgia Secretary of State's office, both of which had overlapping jurisdiction over some of the fund activity Jada had flagged. I didn't know if anything would come of it. I just planted the seed. I let the institutions do what institutions are built to do. Hour 24 through 48. A reporter named Beckett Shaw at the Atlanta Business Chronicle, a woman I had met exactly once at a networking event, who had handed me her card and said, "Call me if you ever have a story," in the way that journalists do, and whose card I had kept in my desk for 2 years, received an anonymous tip from a source she could not name, accompanied by a document package that described in precise and accurate detail the structural irregularities in Callaway Capital Group's fund reporting. Beckett Shaw was good at her job. She made 4 calls, pulled 2 public filings, and by Thursday morning she had a story running on the Chronicle's website under the headline, "Questions Surround Callaway Capital Group Fund Structures Amid Regulatory Inquiry." By noon, it had been picked up by 3 financial trade publications. By 3 p.m., it had hit Bloomberg's regional feed. Hour 48 through 72. Donovan's largest institutional investor, a pension fund administrator out of Charlotte named Garrett Hobbs, read the Bloomberg piece on Thursday afternoon and called Donovan's office to put their capital commitment, $47 million, in formal review pending clarification. Garrett was not the only one. By Thursday evening, 2 more limited partners had sent similar notices. Donovan's fund was not imploding, not yet, but it was bleeding, and everyone on the street could see the bandages. At 11:23 p.m. Thursday night, 3 days after I had texted Vivian those 3 words, Donovan called me. I was sitting in my living room in a silk robe, drinking a glass of Sancerre and watching Lily's little chest rise and fall on the baby monitor because I'd let her sleep in my room that week. I looked at his name on my screen for 5 full seconds. Then I answered. "Cassie?" he said, and his voice was something I had never heard from Donovan Reed Calloway before. It was small. It was scared, and underneath the fear there was this raw, almost childlike confusion, like a man who had never once considered that the person he was underestimating had been watching him from the very beginning. "Cassie," he said, "we need to talk. This has gotten out of hand. This isn't what it looks like." "Cassie," I said, very calmly, "my attorney handles all communication from this point forward. You have her number. Good night." I hung up. I finished my wine. I turned off the lamp. Let me tell you what happened after that, because the next 6 months were the most complicated and the most clarifying of my life, and they deserve more than a summary. Vivian Cross negotiated a settlement that took 4 months and 3 mediations and 1 very tense afternoon deposition during which Donovan's own CFO, a nervous man named Perry Dalton, contradicted Donovan's testimony about the Delaware LLC formation timeline so completely and so accidentally that Vivian literally paused the deposition, looked at me across the table, and pressed her lips together in the specific way that I had learned meant she was trying not to smile. Perry had not been coached to lie for Donovan. Perry, it turned out, had his own concerns about some of what he'd been asked to do and was quietly relieved to be under oath where he had no choice but to be accurate. I'll always be grateful to Perry's conscience. The settlement terms are confidential. What I can tell you is that I kept the Buckhead house, I kept full physical custody of Lily with reasonable visitation rights, and I walked away with a financial arrangement that Vivian described as better than I initially projected, with the very specific smile she uses when she has actually gotten everything. My business, Pruitt Creative Group, which I had been quietly growing through all of this, received a clean separation. No claim, no entanglement, entirely mine. I had insisted on keeping my business finances completely separate throughout the marriage, and I will tell every woman I know for the rest of my life to do exactly the same thing. Donovan's affair with Priya did not survive the public pressure of the regulatory inquiry and the divorce proceedings. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they broke up sometime in month 2 of the legal process. I felt nothing about this, which surprised me until I realized that I had never actually been angry at Priya. She was 26, she was impressionable, and Donovan had a very effective smile. What Priya didn't know, what I only found out later from Vivian, who found out from Donovan's own legal team during discovery, in a moment of breathtaking carelessness, was that Donovan had been telling Priya the same story he told me, that he was almost out of his marriage, that his wife was difficult, that things were almost resolved. He was running the same script on both of us simultaneously. I actually texted Priya when I found out. I said, "He told me the same things he told you. You didn't do this to me. He did. Take care of yourself." She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. I just needed her to know, because I remembered being 26, and I remembered believing men who smiled like that. The SEC and the Georgia Secretary of State inquiries took longer than the divorce. These things always do. I won't pretend I engineered the outcome because I didn't. I just provided information and let the process run. What I know is that by late spring, Callaway Capital Group had quietly dissolved 2 of its fund structures and paid a significant settlement to the Georgia Securities Division. Donovan did not go to prison. The violations were civil, not criminal, in the end, but the fine was substantial, and more significantly, his reputation in Atlanta's private equity community did not recover. By the time summer came, Donovan had relocated to Dallas and was, from what I understood, working as a senior advisor for someone else's firm rather than running his own. He had gone from founder to employee. He would feel that every day. Reginald Spade, who had booked our wedding venue and who I'd always assumed was Donovan's loyal ally, called me in April. He said, "Cassandra, I want you to know I had no idea what he was doing with the fund structures, and I'm sorry for what happened with Lily. A man who says something like that to a child isn't the man I thought I knew." I believed him. Reginald has 2 daughters of his own. Some people, when confronted with who someone actually is, choose honesty. I thanked him and meant it. Now let me tell you about Lily, because this is the part that matters most. Lily turned 8 3 weeks after I filed. We had a party at a trampoline park in Buckhead with 11 of her school friends and a custom cake shaped like a mermaid with a gold tail that Lily had been asking about for 2 months. And she laughed so hard and jumped so high and ate so much cake that she fell asleep in the car before we even got out of the parking lot. I sat in that car in the parking deck for a minute before I started the engine, listening to her breathe, and I thought, she doesn't know that her life just completely changed. She just knows that she is loved and she is safe and she had the best birthday. That is everything. She started seeing a child therapist named Dr. Audrey Watts in November, twice a month at first, then once a month as things settled. Dr. Watts told me in our first parent meeting that Lily was showing normal signs of adjustment stress, but that she was also showing, and I'm paraphrasing, unusual emotional vocabulary for her age and a really healthy attachment to her mother. I cried in Dr. Watts's office parking lot for about 7 minutes, the good kind of crying. Theo, Lily's father, stepped up in ways I didn't expect. When I told him what Donovan had said to Lily, what had happened on that Tuesday afternoon, Theo went quiet for a long moment and then said, "Cass, I'm sorry, I should have been around more and I wasn't, and that gave him space that should have been mine." I didn't tell Theo he was right, because it didn't matter anymore who was right. I told him, "She needs you now, more consistently. Can you do that?" He said yes. He meant it this time. He started taking Lily every other weekend and every other Tuesday for dinner, and he started calling her every night he didn't have her, even just for 10 minutes, even just to ask how school was. Lily started calling him Daddy again instead of just Dad. And if you are a parent, you know exactly what that small linguistic shift means about where a child feels held. My business grew. Pruitt Creative Group took on a rebrand for a hotel group based in Nashville and a campaign for a women's wellness startup, and a full digital overhaul for a law firm in Charlotte. And by the end of that year, I had 14 clients and 6 full-time employees, and a revenue number that I will keep private, except to tell you it was the kind of number that made my accountant raise both eyebrows and say, "Cassandra, you're doing something right." I was. I had always been doing something right. I just hadn't been doing it in a house where someone was watching me do it and trying to make me feel small. I sold the Buckhead house a year after the settlement. Not because I couldn't afford to keep it, I could, but because I didn't want to sleep in rooms where I'd been afraid to take up space. I bought a house in Virginia Highland, smaller, warmer, with a backyard that Lily immediately designated as the garden, even though neither of us knows how to garden, and which we have since populated with tomato plants of varying success and one absolutely thriving rosemary bush that neither of us can explain. The kitchen has a bay window that faces east, and in the morning the light comes in gold, and Lily eats her cereal at the counter and tells me about her dreams, which are always elaborate and full of talking animals and underwater kingdoms, and I drink my coffee and I think, this is what I was building toward. I just didn't know the road would go through him to get here. I want to be honest with you about something. The revenge, the filing, the timing, the regulatory tips, the reporter, all of it, it was satisfying in the way that justice is satisfying, which is to say it was cleaner in execution than it was in feeling. I did not feel triumphant when Donovan's fund started bleeding. I felt tired. I felt the specific exhaustion of a woman who has been holding her breath for years and is only now, in the aftermath, realizing how much oxygen she has been denied. There was no moment where I laughed over his downfall. There was a moment where I sat in Vivian's office after the final settlement was signed, and Vivian said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "Like I can breathe." That was it. That was the whole of it. What I felt triumphant about, what I feel triumphant about still, is this. Lily does not remember that Tuesday the way I do. I know this because Dr. Watts has told me, and because I have watched my daughter carefully for 2 years, and because children's resilience is not a cliché, it is a documented and miraculous fact. What Lily remembers when she talks about that time at all is that her mom picked her up, that her mom carried her out of that room, that the next morning her mom made her pancakes with blueberry faces and told her, "You are the most important thing in the world to me, full stop, not negotiable, forever." She remembers the after. She doesn't live in the during. I made sure of that. And I, Cassandra Elaine Pruitt, from Savannah, Georgia, daughter of a woman who ironed shirts through tears, first-time divorcee, second-time divorcee, single mother, accidental CEO, woman who once sat on a kitchen floor in silence and decided what she was going to become, I am not someone who needs to be told she won. I know what winning looks like. It looks like a Tuesday morning in Virginia Highland with gold light coming through a bay window and a kid eating cereal and telling me about the talking dolphins in her dream. It looks like a business with my name on it that I built myself, that no one can take, that no settlement can touch. It looks like going to sleep at night without the low-level hum of someone else's cruelty playing in the background of every single room. It looks like breathing. There is one more thing. About 8 months after everything settled, I got a call from a woman named Sandra Calloway, Donovan's younger sister, whom I had always liked and who had sent me a handwritten apology note within weeks of the filing that I still have in a drawer somewhere. Sandra called to tell me that Donovan had reached out to her asking for money, and that she had said no, and she wanted me to know she had said no. I told her she didn't owe me that call. She said, "I know, I saw what he did to your little girl. I have a daughter. I couldn't pretend that was nothing." I told her she was a good woman. She said, "I learned it late. You teach it early. Keep doing that." I think about that a lot. I teach it early. Lily knows her worth because I have shown her every single day by refusing to let anyone in our home, in our life, treat her as less than exactly what she is. Someone's greatest reason, someone's everything, someone worth walking out of a room for, someone worth burning an entire lie down to the ground to protect. She is 7, then 8, then almost 9 now, and she is funny and bossy and obsessed with marine biology, and she wears her hair in 2 puffs, and she corrects me when I mispronounce scientific names for sea creatures, and I let her because she is usually right. She is everything I ever wanted to build. And unlike the marriage, unlike the house in Buckhead, unlike all the things I thought I was supposed to want, she was never a mistake, never a miscalculation, never something I would do differently. She is the whole story, every word of it. She is why I got off that kitchen floor. She is why I called Vivian. She is why I kept Jada's number and the reporter's card and every single piece of paper that documented every single thing Donovan thought he was getting away with. She is why I fought smart instead of loud, clean instead of chaotic, with patience instead of panic. She is why I won. And that Tuesday, that afternoon, that moment when a man looked at my 7-year-old daughter and told her she was not his responsibility, that was the moment he stopped being mine. He just didn't know it yet. He was still standing in my kitchen thinking he had the upper hand, still reaching for his phone, still completely certain that I was the kind of woman who would absorb it, who would apologize, who would make it smooth. He had no idea that I had already been thinking for weeks, already had the documents, already had the lawyers, already had the chess pieces arranged. He thought he was watching me pick up my daughter and walk out of the room in defeat. I was walking out of the room in possession of everything I needed to take everything he had. I didn't look back. I don't look back. My name is Cassandra Elaine Pruitt, and my daughter is not anyone's responsibility but mine, and I handle mine just fine.